All right, hello and welcome to the Money Lap newsletter. It's not the Money Lap newsletter, by the way.
You can do better than that, Parker.
I
you
can.
Want to start over? You want to try again?
Maybe one more time. Hello and welcome to the Money Lap podcast. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon and Cassill. This is our podcast about all motorsports, and we do have a newsletter. The Money Lap newsletter at themoneylap.com. 3 times a week. Comes Mondays with highlights from all the biggest motorsports events from the weekend prior. Wednesdays, you get more news and highlights and cool things from around the motorsports world, and also on Friday with some fantasy and that sort of thing in there. But just a little behind the scenes, that newsletter is growing over 5% a week right now, and our open rate, which is how many people are actually opening that newsletter, is growing almost 10% while we grow 5%. It's out of control. It's popping off. People love it, which is cool, and we want more people to be a part of it. So if you're subscribed, we appreciate it. We want to know from you, what can we do to get you to send it to your friends? We're thinking about coming up with a referral program, maybe with merch. I don't know. Is there anything cool? Other cool stuff we can do, Landon? I don't know. Maybe we just
we've talked about T-shirts, hats.
Yeah.
Like what would motivate you, the listener, or the Money Lap newsletter reader, to say, "Hey, I want to spread the word"? Or you know what? You could just do it out of the kindness of your heart because you like us and you support us and you support the newsletter. Because I know it's me and Parker talking here, but we got a whole team of guys that are working their butts off to write this thing and help produce this podcast. Everybody's heard about producer Josh. Kyle's on the newsletter. AJ's making the clips. We got a whole team, so everybody's working hard. Let's get this thing, and we, spread the word.
We do it all for free. All we're asking is just tell your friends. That's all. Same thing with this podcast. Tell your friends. Maybe we can build the referral program. If you spread the podcast and the newsletter word, you win all sorts of cool stuff. Speaking of which, the Firecracker 400, our big sim racing event, the biggest sim racing event in America, as we self-proclaimed it. Over 300 competitors will be vying for a $12,500 prize pool. Our friends from Thrustmaster have come on board. We're going to have some cool content around Thrustmaster's new T818 wheel, their direct drive, which is pretty sweet. But looking forward to that. Kicks off. So when you listen to this, it'll be kicking off that night. You'll be listening to this on Wednesday. This will drop Wednesday morning. We're recording Tuesday afternoon. The first prelims start. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's super exciting. This is like the best 3 weeks in sim racing because it's our tournament. We're gonna whittle this field down. It's gonna be stressful. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So make sure you tune in. That's a lot of good stuff to roll off, Parker. But I'm seeing your notes here. You have some bad news for the PR lab.
Yeah, this is the PR lab. We didn't even say that, but people should know that by now. This is where we just talk about ourselves for a while. We have been on a quest for 100 reviews on this podcast on Apple Podcast, and we were growing like the newsletter. It was like a weed. It was out of control. Since last week's podcast, this one, we have gained one. That's just one whole review. It's not enough to 82 reviews. So it
was a good review, though.
100. It was a great review. It's from Bob White.
I mean, it was honestly, this one review was just like combined all of the energy of great reviews with a huge, impactful statement where Bob White in Texas said, "Best podcast on all things motorsports. Best. Capital
Boom.
B." So, I mean, that right there just tells you that we've made it. We are the best.
Maybe we just quit there. Maybe that's why we're not gaining anymore, because it can't be topped, can it?
So I guess if we can only get one review, at least it's that one. But these reviews coming to get Parker to 100, so he can do whatever it is that he wants to do when we get to 100 reviews.
Start talking
about how he wants to get to 200.
Yeah, I'm gonna start talking about getting to 200. And what I'll do then, we'll see. We got some on Spotify, same crew out there, Potatoes and such. We're not gonna thank you, Potatoes. We appreciate it, buddy. Also, the PR lap, we talked about our own racing. By the way, I raced this past weekend at Atlanta, finished 8th. Not the whole story. I was running the top 5 with just a couple laps to go when I actually packed air on Austin Hill's left rear quarter panel by accident. Spun him out. Wasn't trying to do that. Was just trying to stick with him and to go around the 20 of John Hunter Nemechek and then try and catch the College cars who really controlled this race. We had a okay car. We had a cut down left rear tire at the beginning of the race, and actually the fender was just rubbing the tire too much, so we had to cut it, which probably made us a little slower than we wanted to be. But we were still probably top 5 easy. And we restarted the last restart behind Chandler Smith, who ran out of fuel. So didn't get a great restart, restarting, 3rd on the top lane, and that really set us back. So not the smoothest race. Our team did a good job. Everyone at Big Machine Racing, I appreciate the effort. Our car looks badass. It's a spiked light Coors car. I love it. It's orange and white. I think it looks like an orange going down the track, like an orange, maybe like an orange creamsicle. It pops. The night races, I'm like, oh man, that pops. That's cool. So I like that. But I don't know. Was there anything else from the Atlanta Xfinity race that we should discuss? John Hunter won with what maybe was one of the more atrocious handling cars I've ever seen, which was
oh my gosh,
to him.
His car did not drive well. No. And I don't think there's been a Gibbs car that does drive well at Atlanta since they repaved it. But they've won because, Ty Gibbs won no. Ty Gibbs didn't win. Austin Hill won the inaugural one. Ty Gibbs almost won. Do I have that right?
I can't remember. You've tested my knowledge completely. Well, Austin Hill won one last year, and then he won this year.
So Ty Gibbs won the first one. Austin Hill won the second one.
Maybe, yeah.
Last year was the first year of the repave.
Yeah.
I want to point out one thing that I meant to text you during the race. I think I did text
Once
you
again,
during the race.
I don't have my phone during the race, so this is what I'll read afterwards.
I know, but that's not going to stop me from texting you in the middle of the race. First of all, I think I did text you this during the race, but we didn't discuss it yet. So this is the first time talking about it. I was going to text Keith, your competition director, but then I was like, I don't know how to get this across. So the 21, I think he uncovered one of the best new ways to pass at Atlanta, and that is from the start-finish line to turn 1.
Yeah,
he did a masterful job of getting on the bumper of the car in front of him, which is easier said than done because his car was pretty fast. But he would get runs and get on the bumper of the car in front of him. He would bait them high down the front stretch to the start-finish line, to where the goal is to get the guy in front of you as high on the track as you can, out by the wall at the start-finish line. And if you can get that guy as high on the track as you can at the start-finish line, and you have a position to where you can start to side draft him, and you have a little bit of a run at the same time, then you can shortcut the second dog leg and take max distance inside line down into turn 1, because you baited the driver in front of you as high as you can to where he has to go the longest way possible. He thinks that you're trying to get to his outside, right?
Yep.
And everybody wants to protect the outside because the middle groove is a preferred groove. Everybody's running the outside. But really what you're trying to do is get him to run the outside. So he has to run the longest distance, right? Think about a track and field track or Talladega, I know 2 completely different things, but the high line is a longer way around. Get them to run the high line at the start-finish line. That's when you make your move. And what I think is really perfect about that is the track is so wide there between the start-finish line and turn 1 that if you get that guy all the way out to the outside groove, there's just is such a long way around.
Yep.
And he suckered so many people into blocking high at the start-finish line, and then he would just side draft their left rear, take total distance shortcut down into turn 1. I mean, he would clear him easily in the middle of turn 1 and 2. And he had the fastest car by a lot, but that wasn't entirely just the car. That was a very smart move. That was a good move that I saw him do, picking through the field. And you were close on it one time. With about 8 laps to go, you got stuck underneath the 20 car.
Yep.
into turn one.
Yep.
And the mistake that I thought you made at the time was you tried to side draft the 20 car into turn one, where you needed
just turning earlier.
You need to just take distance. Because the only way you're going to beat him is just shortcut. Because he was running the high groove. He was up the track. But you chased him thinking that you were going to side draft him.
Yep.
But what the 21 had been doing was just full shortcut. And I'm not guaranteeing that you would have cleared him, but you were so close to clearing the 20 that I was like, man, if he would have shortcutted turn one, I wonder if he would have cleared him.
Well, that's where I went all the way back to behind the 00, I want to say, or maybe the 7, and then I had to like each lap make a pass and got all the way back to like 5th or 6th in like 2 or 3 laps. But it was like, and then it was those passes you're describing were the way I made it happen, like getting guys loose off of 4, dive below them, then going the shortest distance into 1, that sort of thing. Like you had to just send it on people when you wanted to make a pass. Yep. It was pretty wild racing.
One last note on this, and we'll move on, and we could spend less time talking about Atlanta later. But I think a lot of people like to make that shortcut move down into turn 3, and
it doesn't work.
It works in turn 3,
well, sort of,
but it's not. It's not as good because the distance gain from shortcutting turn 3 isn't as much. The reason it works in turn 3 is because the field backs up in turn 3, and there's an accordion effect for whatever reason.
Have you looked at the banking there? It's not even close. Like turn 3 looks flat compared to, and if you look at it looking down the backstretch, like if you walk the track, it's flat forever into the corner.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? Whereas 1 is super banked, like you go into the banking. And so what I noticed is like even running higher, it feels like there's less banking. And so like the guys at the top,
really,
yes, and they pinch the bottom, and that's when you get that loose. A lot of guys would get super loose. Yeah. You see it or feel like you're losing the right rear because it's just you don't have the banking to lean on.
So I think the thing that I learned from watching was that I would love to take the next time I race Atlanta is really focusing on the start-finish line to turn 1 as your passing zone for when you're doing these single car, one-on-one, having to pick people off. I think you set up your run into turn 3 to where in the middle of 3 and 4, you're starting to get some momentum on the car in front of you. You, with momentum, bait them as high as you can off of turn 4, get them up the tri-oval, and then hopefully you can make a crossover move at the start-finish line. I don't think you want to do it before the start-finish line. You want to do it at the start-finish line, crossover move, you're out by the wall, and then you're just max distance shortcut into turn 1, and you got it.
I like it. I definitely, I'll note it for sure, and I think I'd like to see it be put in action. So I didn't know if I fully noticed that, but I know what you're talking about. But one thing I will say in terms of car and that sort of thing is Austin was very obvious his car could suck up to someone's bumper a lot better than some other cars, which is pretty running theme when you have a fast car. So hey, question for you. Do you drink coffee before races?
I drink coffee all day, every day.
You do? Interesting.
Yes.
So I didn't like drinking coffee before races because I was like, it'd make me like jittery, and I just didn't feel like. Sometimes I do the energy drinks, but none of those were really great. And then like a year and a half ago, my buddy showed me this coffee that I was like, whoa, this is kind of different. And I now never have a race day without it. Do you want to know what it's called?
I do. Please.
It's called Think Coffee by Four Sigmatic. And it literally, I believe, has made me smarter. And I know you're like, wait a second. How has it made you smarter? It's coffee infused with functional mushrooms that work to wake up your mind. And I'm not kidding when I say this. I've literally felt this. Like, I'll be like, wait, this is different. It's smoother. They say people feel the effects in as little as 7 days. But I don't know. I feel like I felt it within a couple days of just like, wait, something's going on with this coffee I'm drinking because my brain is operating at a higher level than it did before. And so I'm a huge fan of it. I love just this coffee. I love the way it makes you feel. They have a couple other different coffees out there. I also use their vanilla plant-based protein and their Focus product. And the best part about this, Landon, do you want to know the best part?
What's the best part?
if you want to try this, you can have their Think Starter Pack, which is the Think Coffee, the Focus, and their Vanilla Creamer, 40% off. And then if you use MoneyLap, it's another 15% off, which is 55% off, which I'm no rocket scientist, but I think is a deal. I'm not BSing, by the way. You know this about me. I've had it sent to you as well. This is the coffee I love. I prefer it. If you want to have the coffee that I believe helped me win Mid-Ohio last year, it's Think Coffee by Four Sigmatic. Use MoneyLap.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you for Sigmatic. Yes, I have a lot of their stuff because I've gotten some great care packages from them. The protein, the coffee, it is all in the Cassill house. So, and we're big coffee drinkers. It tastes like, and you think like mushroom coffee, all this stuff. It just tastes like regular coffee. And I'm
It's incredible.
daily coffee drinker.
This might be one of the more genuine, like. I would say I would be using that code because I love this coffee. Yeah, this is organic as it gets, especially because it's organic coffee. There you go. So let's move into some racing. We mentioned it. We talked about the Xfinity race, but NASCAR was in Atlanta. The Cup Series on Sunday put on a show, an epic show, because they had rain approaching and everyone knew it. And this was a race to basically end of stage 2/halfway. And it was incredible. I mean, it was one of the coolest races I've watched in a long time because you just had this anticipation of this, looming end, and everyone was going as hard as they possibly could to get to the lead and crazy fuel strategies, and it was just a wild race. I think the winner in the end, to me, I thought it was going to be one of those races you get a crazy winner. It was still William Byron. Sorry for the spoiler. But in terms of the racing, it was incredible, and there was a couple cool stories up in the top 5.
Oh yeah, I mean, I actually meant to send a tweet out during the race, but I didn't. But I was gonna say every racetrack should have dashes, like highway dashes, through the corner, like Atlanta does, because those cars, the camera work, and with the dashes and everything, those cars just looked like they were going so fast,
like 1,000.
And the racing was so good. You hate to see it cut short, but even it is kind of cool when new strategies emerge, because of weather variabilities and things like that. So, but kudos to NASCAR for playing it safe, for the drivers and teams, and the race wasn't even ultimately a disappointment.
It wasn't, and I mean the thing that got me was like Michael McDowell with a damaged car goes 91 laps on fuel. I mean, that thing had to be on absolute fumes to get a top 5. AJ Allmendinger with the top 3 finish. I mean, in position to win there if he makes a little bit different move. We talk about Colleague going with him in the Cup Series as someone that was going to get them into the playoffs via winning a road course. Right now, we're halfway through the season. He's there points. So, AJ is just doing AJ things as of late. Since he's gone down to Xfinity, gained a love of driving again, confidence, whatever it is, goes back to Cup Series full time and is not only, doing things as a road course guy, but is up there. And I thought this race, I know he ran well there in Xfinity as well, but I just felt like it looked like he could win. A McDowell. I mean, JJ Yeley, I think, finished 7th, by the way.
Wow.
Crazy.
Track position was so huge, especially in the Cup cars.
Yeah.
Which is funny because, we complain about that kind of thing a lot of times, but yet here we are talking about how great the race was. So what gives? You can't.
I don't know.
It's impossible to please us.
You can't get it right.
Speaking of track position things, so NASCAR is trying this new front spoiler, and they're going to test it after the New Hampshire race. And this is like the culmination of so many water cooler conversations around the sport. I'm so excited. It's so interesting on what they're trying. And I just started hearing, it sounds like the word is kind of getting out. I think some drivers have actually been public about saying what it is, but NASCAR is trying a new splitter or front spoiler here that creates lift in clean air. And my understanding is that this piece creates lift in clean air, but then in dirty air, because you don't have the air underneath it creating lift, the car actually will gain like 100 pounds of downforce. So
Wild.
if you're in traffic, you actually would have more downforce in traffic than you would in clean air.
Bring back
But not
the
by a
tandem.
lot. Like this isn't, don't this isn't dramatic. I mean, 100
Yeah.
pounds is a lot, but it also my understanding is that in clean air, this with this front spoiler, the car makes no downforce, zero.
Whoa.
So
Whoa.
when we talk about the era of like 80s cars or whatever back in the day where there's no downforce, this is it. There's no downforce on these cars in clean air.
They were creating lift back then, and I think some people are calling this the lift splitter, which we need to give a shout out to Kevin McAdams on Discord. Yes, we see the podcast questions in our Discord. That's the E-Racer Discord, by the way, where he said, what do you guys think of the new rumored, quote, lift splitter being tested by NASCAR? So I guess maybe that's going to be the term that is going to gain, is the lift splitter.
The lift splitter.
Yeah, so I mean, which old race cars, they were just cars back in the day before we really understood downforce and all those things. A lot of race cars created lift because they didn't really understand the difference, right? The Ford GT40 original models would go down the Mulsanne straight at 210 miles an hour, and the front tires would basically be coming off the ground, as the drivers would talk about, because they didn't understand what was happening, right? They didn't know about aerodynamics and downforce, and then we've learned about it, obviously, over the decades, and now it's become something where most motorsports are trying to rid the cars of downforce or the effects of being a trailing car. So this is the reason this is wild, is that we've never tried to go, or at least in my time, I haven't heard of someone or a series trying to make the car do what it normally would do by itself behind our car. And what I mean by that is, to create downforce behind a car has never been the intention. The intention has always been to make the front car have less of effect on the rear car. That's always been, so this car with the underbody aero was designed with a hope that it wouldn't affect the car behind as much, but that's obviously not been the case. So a lot of cars do that.
I wouldn't say it's not been the case. It's hard to say if it's a failed experiment or not. I think that where we could say it. Well, first of all, let me just say what I think happened with this car is they did a really good job of like tightening the air bubble behind the wake that the car makes.
Yep.
This next gen car, they did a really good job of tightening that bubble to where the wake is smaller and more controlled. But then as a result, that's where you get these intermediate races where we've had fantastic races on intermediate tracks because it's a smaller wake. So the car behind can kind of get offline of the car in front of them and the air is perfectly clean, right? And they can race really close side by side or adjacent to each other. But the car is still making a wake and there is still dirty air. It's just really condensed, right? So it's now you have like this really concentrated channel of dirty air directly behind a car, right, in traffic. And I think that's actually why the short track racing has been bad, because short tracks are smaller tracks. They're, more narrow. You don't have as many grooves to widen out. Think of a place like Martinsville. I mean, there's one groove. You run the bottom.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
So when you do that, you literally have no choice but to run in that highly concentrated wake of the car in front of you. So, I think that's one way to think of like, well, why has the racing been so good at Las Vegas, but not at Martinsville, or so good at Charlotte, right? Where Charlotte has been a snoozer for the past decade. But then, with the next gen, it's been incredible. The racing's been awesome. But then Martinsville, our favorite tracks, our short tracks have been, hashtag more short tracks for the last couple of years. But we institute the next gen, and it's like, oh my God, how did we just ruin these short tracks? Yeah. So now NASCAR is essentially, with this idea of the car creating lift in clean air, means it would have less lift in dirty air. So you would, in theory, handle better in dirty air.
That would be a shocker.
One thing I think is a very small but highly unconsidered thing in when it comes to dirty air. There's a little bit of dirty air that is a what am I trying to say? Because this isn't in my notes. I'm just kind of making this on the fly. But this has been a conversation in the past. There's a little bit of dirty air in terms of the drivers is mental. And that is when you are a driver and you're going into a corner at any speed and you have a car right in front of you, your visuals are all different, right?
Mhm.
So your angles and the way what you're used to looking at going into the corner, the signs, maybe the markings on the racetrack, the paint on the line, your perception of where you're at on the track changes. And I've actually seen in the sim before where we race with like a ghost car and you feel like you're getting aero tight in the sim with a ghost car in front of you with no aero effect. There's no aero going on. You're not getting any aero from the ghost car in front of you in the sim. The ghost car is literally doing nothing other than it's pixels on a screen that's in your way. And you're used to looking at the apex of the corner, but instead there's a car in front of you. And you'll make laps and you think to yourself, or I've even seen drivers in the sim that I've worked with before have like reported back to the teams like, I'm getting tight behind the ghost car. And it's like, well, there's no actual scientific reason for you to get tight behind the ghost car. It's all in your head. It's because you're changing your angles and you're changing your perceptions because there's a car in front of you. So I would definitely venture to say that you will never get rid of a driver saying that they have an aero tightness or a handling change in traffic, because the drivers will still have that perception change. But I digress. This whole, playing with the aero balances and this front spoiler, and we talked about the rear spoilers and all that stuff, is really exciting to see NASCAR try things, and NASCAR, I'm not trying to, be condescending towards NASCAR. I think they're always trying things. They've always been trying things. This is just a really interesting thing to try by completely, changing the functionality and the goal of the front spoiler. Speaking of spoilers, SpoilerDiecast.com is one of the largest inventories of in-stock products in the industry. From NASCAR to dirt sprint cars, Indycar, and F1. Let's not forget about their pre-order system with a $0 option. Talk about flexibility, right? Plus, they have a promo code, Parker, MONEYLAP, for free shipping and 5% off all orders. So whether you're looking to reduce some front downforce by installing a front splitter with AeroLift or just looking to upgrade your diecast collection, Spoiler Diecast has the gear you need to enjoy your hobbies to the fullest. Trust me, it is like a breath of clean air on my front spoiler, splitter, car, whatever. So
Spoiler Diecast
and use the promo code MONEYLAP for free shipping and 5% off all orders. You won't regret it.
Spoiler Diecast, thank you for supporting the pod. We appreciate it. We got ads all over the place. Look at us. We're so cool. Speaking of advertisements, it's awesome. We love it. Thank you all, everyone listening. We couldn't do without you. Please send feedback right in the YouTube comments on YouTube. If you watch there, we'll read them. They're fun to read. Send us messages on Twitter, Threads. We'll get into that later. But speaking of advertisements, Busch Light announced today, Tuesday, July 11th, that they are going to be
sponsoring us.
Nope, they're not sponsoring us. So we're going to keep this real short. Because Big Machine Vodka Spike Coolers are better anyway. They're going to Ross Chastain and Trackhouse, which was a big deal for Ross and Trackhouse.
Yeah.
So congrats to them. That's awesome. All right, moving on. Formula One.
Can I make one note about that? I do want to move on.
No, I don't want to say anything about it.
This is a extremely big moment in the sport because, and I wanted to, the way I want to ask this is, when was the last time a blue chip franchise sponsor moved from one organization to the other, which I think that's happened, but not just that, from a established key partner organization to now Trackhouse has established themselves, I think, as an established key partner organization, but there's still a challenger brand, right?
Yeah.
Like they're, you know, I don't know if you would put them until just recently on equals to SHR in terms of like established. SHR has championships, you know, the wins, the history. When was the last time we saw a blue chip sponsor like that take their talents to another organization?
I can name one. Well, I can name one. So I saw it happen. You know, there's a lot of B2B with this one, which we've talked about before. But when Shell Pennzoil left RCR to go to Penske,
that's a big one.
That was a big one. I remember that moment and thinking similar to how you did, which is like, whoa, that's a big deal.
That's a monumental shift.
Yeah, for that, you know, for RCR to lose it, for Penske to gain it, it's just like, whoa, that's a big one, right? And that's, I mean, I would believe for Stuart Haas, this has got to feel the same way, right? Like, unless there's some others out there, you know, losing, as you put it, a blue chip like that it's hard to replace. And those relationships normally go for a very long time because they're very entrenched and it's very big programs that have a lot of people that work around them. I
mean, they're able to, and this is an interesting dynamic to me on the business side of it is like, and this is part of my next question. Normally when they're that entrenched, you know, with Harvick taking, I guess Harvick, you know, going from RCR to Stuart Haas was a huge shift with that sponsor, right? Budweiser. Yeah. And then having a decade, you know, over a decade relationship, Harvick as the driver, usually you see kind of a smooth transition from Harvick to, you know, the replacement driver, and they're able to like keep that all together. So, you know, obviously Harvick retiring from driving and then the sponsor going over to Trackhouse. And Harvick, I think, still has like these ties to Stuart Haas because he has drivers that he represents that are over there, and sponsors I think that he represents that are over there. I mean, did Harvick lose his relationship with Anheuser-Busch too? Like, did Trackhouse completely get this whole package, or did Harvick's agency bring Anheuser-Busch over to Trackhouse? I don't know that. I don't know if you know that or not, or
I
if
don't
we should
know that. I don't know that, but
interesting.
I know Ross is not with KHI. He's his own management group, MMI, which he's owner of.
Which leads me to think that Harvick probably doesn't have anything to do with the management of the sponsorship.
Nope.
Which is, you know, interesting. That's a surprise.
Yep. On the business side, that is definitely a, you know, blow for all of them involved that were part of that and are not, you know, now, because that's, you know, and for Trackhouse, it's just it's a feather in the cap. It's a monumental moment for that team to be less challenger and more established contender at the front, which they are. I mean, you have to say that. They have been that since this deal.
I'm almost, you know, behind the curve by even calling them a challenger team at this point because, you know, they're up there in terms of organizations that I think any driver in the sport would call a dream team scenario.
Yep.
I was actually having this random thought this morning about Project 91, and I'm like, what a great brand that they just created. You know what I mean? Like,
so good.
They like Project 91 doesn't have a charter, but I feel like Justin could sell Project 91 to somebody.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Like McLaren could come into NASCAR and buy Project 91 from the brand itself. What do you think that would be worth? A couple $1,000,000 maybe? I don't know. Who knows? It's not.
I don't know.
There's no equipment tied to it necessarily. Yeah. There's no, you know, it doesn't have a charter, but like, I don't know. It's a niche, right? It's a car number. It's a brand. It's international drivers coming into NASCAR. You could that's a pretty valuable property. If Justin needed to or wanted to, he could sell Project 91 to somebody and give them a good jump start on, you know, drivers and sponsors for that model.
Damn, that's fascinating because I didn't even think about that. But you're right; like it's established brand now for international drivers to come and try NASCAR, and for millions of race fans now,
have to own that.
Yeah, for millions of race fans now, that is what they'll think. Like if a driver comes over from anywhere else, they'll think, well, why did they not do it in Project 91?
Yeah, Like imagine being a kid, if you're a young race fan right now, like I'm thinking of myself when I was a kid, I
Yep.
would have had, a binder full of all the drivers that drove the Project 91 car, and I would have
Yep.
known every driver that drove it and their backgrounds and where they came from, and that would be like a thing that I knew, Project 91. Like that's what that, and I
Hmm.
know that was the purpose of why Justin did that. So this is no surprise. I know we're behind the times here in terms of revealing this to the world. While Justin created this car, this was obviously his vision from the start. But it's just funny to see it play out in fruition now with a race win. It's like that car doesn't have to be a Trackhouse car. Another, somebody could come and be an investor in Project 91 and elevate Project 91 to another level, right? If they wanted to. Justin created this niche and this model that and this brand that kind of has carved out a little bit of ownership space in NASCAR out of something that didn't even exist, right? Everybody thinks you got to own charters to own anything valuable in the sport. And Trackhouse is kind of proving that you can just create a good brand, and if it's a good brand and people like it, it's valuable.
Man, that's interesting. That's really I didn't I knew the reasoning for the brand and differentiation and all that, but the way you just put it and how it's been that successful, there's no doubt it is an entity that is valuable now. It's a brand. It's a valuable brand. That's incredible. You mentioned McLaren, which means we can jump into Formula One because British Grand Prix was this last weekend. There was 4 very exciting laps that Lando Norris was ahead of Max Verstappen, but McLaren was incredibly fast all weekend, and there were some who said they basically gained 1 second in pace with these upgrades that they brought to the British Grand Prix, which is just insane. But some of the doubters, or at least I guess not doubters, we'll just say critics out there, started to notice some very close similarities to the Red Bull in terms of the design of the McLaren and their upgrades, which I say, cool, well done. Like if you figured out how to take photos and copy that from photos and turn it into CAD drawings, I don't know. It's people get all fussy about that, and I'm like, well, wait a second. Yeah, like sometimes people want to say like, oh, there was the gate McLaren gate many years ago. They got fined $100 million for stealing secrets from Ferrari or whatever.
Right.
But the thing is, all these teams are taking video and photos and scanning their competitors' cars constantly. There was years where the F1 cars had, in practice, they had cameras on them that were filming the car ahead of them, and it was just doing all sorts of crazy stuff, trying to figure out what they have. And so if they were able to use whatever technology they're using, maybe they have about 487 technology sponsors at McLaren, and that might be an understatement. It could be 675, I don't know. Maybe one of those sponsors has some crazy technology that can scan those cars and create CAD drawings, and boom, here you go. Here's your new parts. I don't know, but kind of cool to see, or crazy to see.
It's funny. We kind of talked about this last week when we were talking about your sharing your driver notes to Mid Ohio.
Oh yeah,
and I think I quoted Kiichiro Toyota, who said way back in the 1950s, once people asked him about the threat of his designs of his sewing machines getting out, he said that it doesn't matter if they copy the designs; it's the knowledge from all the failures that got to the design that they're not getting. And so we see that in technical alliances in racing too, where it's like you can take a team that is building their own cars and created the technology to build those cars and the manufacturing to build those cars. And then another team comes in and becomes a technical partner, and they buy all the same equipment, right? And they're buying the cars and they're buying the parts and pieces. They have the same simulation. They work with the engineers. They sit in all the meetings. They even get the cars built for them. And somehow they don't run as good. And it's like there's this unquantifiable value in being the one that made the design that is worth that extra little bit. right? Whatever it is, I don't even know. Or if it's execution,
Or just
don't know.
understanding the intricacies of it and knowing where to make
Well, that's what
whatever it
makes
is.
me think of that. That's what makes me think of that quote from Kiichiro Toyota, which is just like you could copy every ounce of our design, but because you didn't make it, because you didn't make the design, you're not getting the actual knowledge, and that knowledge is what it allows you to execute on it. Right now,
Yeah.
if McLaren did copy the design, and obviously they would have had to stolen actual drawings and stuff to get a true copy. If they're just copying it off of pictures, that's even a farther separated from the kind of rabbit hole I just went down. But it is an interesting thing in racing. And now, in racing, it is fun to look at your competitors' cars and try to kind of take one thing that you see and then put the puzzle pieces together to say, hey, are they looking at this from a different perspective than we are? And sometimes it does help. And in Formula One, everything is so outward facing because you have side pods and, you see everything, underbellies and all that stuff.
I don't think they refer to it as underbellies.
Or what do they call it? Underwing?
Trays. Floor,
Trays?
under the floor. Yeah. Underbellies.
But it's interesting to think like, okay, if McLaren... Okay, well, I want to go down just one more rabbit hole in this.
Okay.
If McLaren copied Red Bull's design just based off of pictures and insider knowledge, maybe they got a mole at Red Bull or people that they talk to. What how NASCAR garage, or, the NASCAR garage is, right? Like,
yep.
There's people get information from all sorts of places. If McLaren went down that route, that wasn't something they just learned in a weekend, right? Like they didn't just like Zach didn't. Zach and the team didn't wake up on a Monday morning and flip through some photos and go, oh, well, that's enlightening. Let's build our car that way. They would have had to I'm creating this world. I don't even know if this is true or possible or not. Zach Brown, if you're listening, send me a text and tell me if this is true. They would have had to create this intentional months long effort of this is how we're going to improve the pace of our cars. We're going to copy Red Bull.
Yeah.
And then here's how we're going to do it. We're going to review photos and we're going to create mock-ups and copycats and then put them in CFD and create the CAD drawings. It's not an overnight thing. They didn't just look at a side pod and go, oh, we should try our side pods like that.
Damn,
they would have had to redesign. So it would have had to been hey, instead of just continuing down our own path of development, we're just going to copy this other car. But even that is a process of development if they were to do it that way.
Well, 100%, because you also have to confirm the stuff. You have to make it work within your car and all the different intricacies of your car and really, your balance of your cars, all the things you've done that are just different. You're going to have to make it meld and gel with that. And that's going to be a massive process. But to your point, it didn't just, I think some people look at it and they're like, oh, they just showed up with upgrades this week. That must have been, that happened over Tuesday to Wednesday. And it's no, this is months in the making. It's a massive undertaking to build these parts. Teams talk about all the time. Even if you have new parts, you can't even always have them, backups of them because you can't create them fast enough. They're not manufacturing facilities at the scale of a car manufacturer because they're making bespoke one-off parts. So if you need to create an entirely new wing design and use, through your carbon autoclaves and that sort of stuff, that is a each and every time singular process that can't just be repeated as you make changes, right? So I think that's another thing that people lose focus in the difficulty of making improvements and in copying in our car because it's a huge undertaking.
How many months do you think this project was for McLaren? Because I'm just thinking about the race season and I'm thinking it was about a month and a half ago that the Red Bull car famously was lifted up and photographed in Monaco.
Weird. I was going to say a month. I was going to say May-ish.
So I wonder if that inspired maybe that was the turning point on the McLaren strategy. McLaren was awfully frustrated back then too.
They were very frustrated. They were
pretty frustrated back in May.
Toto Wolff put out some frustration at the the amount they picked up, and he basically said, well, if they did it, maybe we should do it too. So
hey, whatever it takes, I guess.
yeah,
But that's pretty cool. The interesting, I guess, the good news, bad news. The good news is the cars are faster. The bad news is they gained all their speed in the high speed corners, and Silverstone's over. So
you need another high speed track. Good luck.
we need another high speed track. When's our next high speed track on F1?
They were still almost 0.3 behind Max Verstappen,
and they're still 3 tenths off.
Yeah.
Which we gained all this time, and they did finish podium. They did a wonderful job, but nobody is within 3 to 5 tenths of the Red Bull.
No, because if the Red Bull makes one improvement, or Max, they just tune up the motor a little bit, he's gone. Can I just say one more thing about McLaren? Can you consider yourself a tech company if you don't currently sponsor McLaren? I'll leave that question out there for the masses.
Yeah, that's a good one. Very good.
Are you in tech?
Are you even a tech company if you don't sponsor the McLaren F1 team?
Yeah, just if you're not a logo of one of those 4,000 tech company logos, then I'm not sure how long you're going to last. Some news, driver news. It's been shocking the world today for some. Nick DeVries is out at AlphaTauri. Danny Ricciardo is in at AlphaTauri. He did a little test for Red Bull and now is suddenly going to be driving again. There's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, we talked about this on this pod a couple weeks ago, maybe, right? And we were both talking about drivers, and you brought up a great point, which was, hey, what does that say? When they were talking about getting rid of him only 3 months into the season or 2 months into the season, you were like, what does that say about the management decisions that were made to hire this driver?
I tweeted it.
Yeah. And then I saw, you find your tweet, but then I saw Lucas Degrassi, who's the Formula E champion. And he tweeted today, when you axe a driver after 10 races, it shows the process of making the hiring decision is wrong. Motor racing relies too much on instinct or, quote, one lap or, quote, one race result instead of looking to the long-term norm of a specific driver. So much methodology and data to make the car, what did he say here? To make the car faster, so little used to choose the right race driver. I did tag you on that tweet and say it sounds familiar because your tweet was very similar to that. But it does. He's entirely right about this because you like it gets posed like, oh, bad driver, all this stuff, but really they didn't do their homework potentially here.
Yeah. So my tweet was, while I understand, I tweeted this on June 30th, back when the rumors started. Formula Racers on Twitter started was reporting the race was reporting some things, and so the rumors were swirling, and I tweeted, while I understand the importance of performance and the responsibility the driver has, it often seems to me that mid-season moves from teams, especially at a high level of Formula One. You didn't just read this, did you?
No, I just read Lucas Degrassi's. Maybe
you
he
read
copied
Lucas.
you.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking for my own tweet. Especially at a high level of Formula One, are a reflection of poor management more so than a poor driver. If I'm the owner of a team where the management is setting objectives such as do better and threatening to replace a rookie driver mid-season, I'm asking management questions like, how did we get here? What were our goals? Did those goals change? Bias disclosure, I am a driver. And then, it's kind of interesting. We had some conversations about that on the phone. I spoke with some actually team general managers about it, kind of brought the opposing view to me that I would be a fun debates to have more in the open, but I actually was able to kind of sway my subject on it, where I'm just like, hey, I get it if you want to say Nick wasn't performing, maybe he wasn't showing up to meetings. By the way, none of this is being claimed. I don't, nothing. I'm just saying these are a lot of times the results of how a driver gets fired, right? It's not just because they suck. Maybe the driver wasn't doing their homework, weren't they? They weren't working well with the team, right? But my point is, you're F1, you have $200 million a year to spend.
Yep.
You you have these teams of people that are responsible for assembling the most optimal race team within the budget. You have a lot of resources, and 3 months ago, this was your guy, right? Everybody was excited. He came to the Christmas party after you signed him before the season got started. Like this was your guy, and
Wait,
10 races into it.
Unpack that a little bit. Just take me back to that time frame, because I feel like we've been there.
I'm just saying,
Take the listeners through the time frame.
I don't even know when Nick. I don't even know when Nick and Alpha Tauri signed their original deal. But if they signed it in October, he came to the Christmas party, right? So if they had a deal
"You're the
in
man."
October, he came to the Christmas party, drinking Red Bull vodkas, partying. Everybody's pumped. He had a ton of success. Beforehand, that's how he got the ride in the first place. Like, this guy's the next big thing. He's excited. It's always exciting to bring a rookie on, because in a lot of ways, like, rookie drivers, there's so much blue sky, because you bring on a rookie because he's talented and he's proven, but then the team also kind of, they have this pressure, but then they also don't have this pressure, because they're like, hey, it's a rookie and he's gonna have to learn, and there's gonna be bumps down the road. So it's just like, 6 months ago, this was your guy. We were excited about him, and he made it 10 races into the season, and you're canning him. Right? Like, we didn't even get through the season. We didn't get through 2 seasons to say, hey, like, here's a pattern, that we've seen. There's 10 races into the season, and we're canning this guy. Right? To me, my argument, and Lucas DeGrassi rightfully tweeting this, is just like, hey, that's a management problem. That's not a driver problem. I'm not saying the driver's not the problem. I don't know. I really don't know much about Nick DeVries. But if the driver really is the problem, and Nick is not capable of being an F1 driver at this level, then management should have never hired him in the first place. Their process for hiring was bad.
Yep. And
their selection process was flawed. Now, maybe Nick is capable. Maybe he is, maybe, I don't know, we didn't get him in the right environment. I think that it's just, this kind of decision is just more chaotic than it is strategic.
Yeah.
I don't understand the strategy behind it. It's not like they kept him for a year and then said, hey, he didn't perform on these KPIs that we're looking for, or 2 years. 10 races into the season, replacing your rookie driver, that's just chaotic.
It doesn't make much sense. But as we like to say in racing, I think a lot of the media and people are viewing this as a performance thing. But the AlphaTauri has proven to be one of the slowest cars in the season, right? If you look at the last couple of years, Yuki Tsunoda had a really tough first year. And was vastly behind his teammate Pierre Gasly. Then got a little closer, closed the gap by about 20% the next year, but was still a problem. The difference is Yuki Tsunoda is a Honda development driver. Honda provides the engines to AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri was told earlier this year, or remember at one point reported had an offer to be sold for somewhere around 800 million, 700 million, somewhere in there. We look at Dietrich Mateschitz, oh my gosh, how do I say it? Mateschitz, whatever. From Red Bull, passes away. This is a B team for them. There's rumors that they are told, hey, you're no longer going to be AlphaTauri. You have to figure out a way of being more self-sufficient funding-wise. Rookie driver who doesn't bring anything suddenly isn't performing as well. Within the Red Bull system is a fan favorite superstar who doesn't have a ride. You're trying to sign sponsors to fill the gap because your main source of support is saying you have to become self-sufficient. I'm not a rocket scientist, and I don't know if all that lines up perfectly. But as I sit here and read all these different things, as we like to say in racing, follow the money. To me, this seems less about performance and more about financial upside. And so I believe Nick DeVries unless there's some more data that comes out that he's just unbelievably bad at driving suddenly compared to everything they saw beforehand, would tell me that this is a financial move, less a performance move.
Usually, such is the case. And you're right, Parker. And that was a very thoughtful analysis. Even more thoughtful than what I think. My analysis is pretty thoughtful, that these types of decisions are chaotic and they have less to do with the driver and more to do with management. And actually, you're right. If you're right, Parker, then it does have to do with management, right?
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
It is purely managing the business. It is purely managing the business.
Do I agree with if they've been putting this all about performance? If that's really the case, it's an unfortunate casualty. Now, Red Bull does have a history in the past of doing things like this, right? They've moved guys from the top down. Danny Kvyat had that happen, right? Pierre Gasly, was moved famously and then went on to win again. So they've done this sort of thing. But in this specific situation, I just find a lot of it odd. And I looked at all those factors, and to me, I don't know. They seem too closely to line up with what we know about racing and finances to make this more of a financial decision than a performance one.
When was the last time we saw something like this in NASCAR?
Oof.
Rookie driver, 10 races into the season, canned.
Where would that be?
It's been a while. I feel like this maybe was more prevalent in the early 2000s to see.
Definitely the early 2000s. They were more cutthroat about it. I don't think there was a lot of, there was a lot of data used.
Speed might have got parked.
Well, AJ.
Who?
You're talking about AJ got
Was it
parked.
AJ that got parked or Scott Speed? It was AJ that got parked.
Yep.
And they put Mike Skinner in for some races.
They were struggling to make races for sure. He had that happen. Who else? I'm thinking of another one. I mean, I think you could say a little bit of Joe Logano and JGR falling apart, but that was after a couple of years. So it's not quite the same.
I'm talking about brutally harsh
short time period.
Short time period. Now, mine is actually the opposite. I have an interesting story that's the opposite. My first real cup opportunity in 2011 with Phoenix Racing driving for James Finch, I replaced Bill Elliott after 5 races in the season.
How dare you?
Now, he wasn't the rookie. I was the rookie going in. He was $1 Million Bill. But
I don't remember
5
that.
races into the season, Finch said, "No mo," and moved Bill out.
Landon. Yep. Did you get any hate mail?
No, I don't think so. That was also Twitter existed, but that was before Twitter was really rocking and rolling when it comes to that.
You do that now, you would be public enemy #1. I'm surprised you admitted it.
I think Bill's doing all right.
Yeah, I think he's off. He'll be fine. That Chase,
I did feel a little
that
bad
Chase
about
boy
it.
of his might be successful too.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
I felt bad a little bit at the time, but I was so excited. But I can't think of anything else. I can't think of. Gosh, we got to be missing one because I totally put that on the spot. Put you on the spot on that.
No, I know. I was trying to think even like Xfinity. Like I'm thinking of the Reed Sorensen at the 32. He was 3rd in points.
What?
Was it 2011, 2012? Didn't he lead the 32 like mid-season?
No, it was late in the season though. Like
late in the season.
They lost. I think they lost their sponsor. And yeah, they were like running well in points and just straight up
just gone.
I think was that the Dollar General deal like went away or something went away.
But I don't think Dollar General left yet. I think there was something going on.
They were going to leave the next year and they just I can't remember what it was.
I don't know.
Remember that was pretty egregious.
Yeah. So I've seen it there.
I mean, I say that from the driver's perspective. We don't have all of our facts or know exactly what was going on and deciding.
Right now we have 0 facts.
I know because we can't even come up with a really good example.
All right, should we move on? But
first and foremost, said that ChatGPT has been entirely unhelpful. So thank
it doesn't even know
for trying to use AI to help find old examples of this. But
what's next?
Know what?
We'll look it up for next time. If you're listening and you know an example of what we're talking about in NASCAR, even IndyCar, send it in. Let us know. Tweet at us, something like that. We'll put it on the next podcast. We'll see. I'm sure more information will come out here about this Nick DeVries situation. My last bit about this, and that we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but just for Danny Ricciardo, he's basically stepping into the worst car, one of the worst cars on the grid, which I find an odd thing to do, but hey, he's got the edge. He's going to go racing. So we'll see. We promised last week that we would dive into some of the economics of Formula E because you've prefaced it. You might be, we're going to one day we'll own a team, or you're going to be racing Formula E as the first NASCAR driver to make the switch. Who knows? But that got me thinking about all the economics around it. And I actually had a young kid this past weekend tell me he was looking forward to us going to this discussion. So this is for you, young kid. I didn't get his name. So
it's also for me because this could be potentially.
You should know these things.
My future.
You should know these things. So from what I could gather in some quick Google searching, first and foremost, how much does it cost to run a Formula E team? So I had heard all sorts of wild numbers. Like at one point, teams are spending $15 million per car, that sort of thing. It does kind of line up with what I'm seeing because they enacted a budget cap that goes up subsequently over the next couple of years. Right now, the spending cap is $14.5 million, which I believe is over both cars. So, roughly seven and a quarter per car. This goes up to 16.9 over the next couple of years for both cars. They only do 16 races, of which there's only, I think, 12 events. So that puts you, if you just do it per race, that puts you at $500,000 per car, basically, when they get to that level. So the bit that gets me curious about those numbers I was told about these teams spending around $15 million per car, the top ones, was the manufacturer's cap. They're able to spend $28.2 million across 2 seasons for R&D and, quote, team-related services. So that's where I think some of the top teams get their budgets a bit higher, right? And maybe the budgets were higher, and now they've started to try to come down with this cost cap. So I found that interesting, but I think really what you can sum it up to. What's that?
Do manufacturers support more than just one organization?
They do have occasionally where they'll, some teams have used the powertrain of another manufacturer for sure. So, it's not like, it's kind of like Formula 1. The powertrain can go sort of around. So I thought this was interesting. I think for fans to understand who primarily probably listen to our podcast know NASCAR really well, $500,000 per race, that lines up with a spend of a top cup team for sure. That's a Hendrick.
On a per race budget.
Yeah, on a per race budget.
But not on an annual budget.
Not on an annual budget, no. But on
there's
per
twice
race.
as many cup races as there are Formula E races.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, I was saying if you expanded it out, they would be spending similar. These. So, what I took from this is it's very similar to a cup team in terms of per race. Obviously, total spend different. You just double basically every bit of this, and that would be your total spend for 2 cars or 1 car in the Cup Series. I could not find out what it would take to buy one right now. So I couldn't get that answer. If you're listening out there and you can help me find that, I'd be more than happy to entertain the information because there just wasn't a lot of information out there. I think these are obviously not traded around a lot. How do you value these things? I could not, and this is what I was trying to find out, how much money the series was making revenue-wise. I could find that out, but I couldn't exactly find out how much was going to the teams and what the level of sponsorship was out there, from the TV rights and broadcast rights. But it seems like the series in 2020 was just about approaching profitability for the first time. So they've been losing money for years prior because I think they were subsidizing the teams a lot. They'd started to get to the point where they were able to profitably subsidize the teams, provide them an allocation of some sort of income, and then also make a profit. That sort of went awry post-pandemic, but they now have a new CEO who's doing a great job in his first 30 to 100 days and is excited about all sorts of different prospects they have in terms of broadcast rights, new races, sponsors coming on board. So, and I think he made one really good point, which is that there's every day more and more electric cars on the road, and there's more electric cars being made and that sort of thing. And so for them, the tailwind effect of the electric car becoming more prolific throughout the world is only going to be a boom for them. So they're basically You want to go racing in Formula E, you got to have some cheese right now.
So zeroing this back into our action plan.
Yep.
Let's say step one of it isn't necessarily buying a team, but step one is getting me in a Formula E car full time.
We need to send you in there like a spy.
We need. So you said the spending cap is between 14.5 and 16.9. So we need 15 million, but that's for 2 cars.
That's 2 cars. Yeah, you just need 7.5.
So for me, I just need 7.5.
Yeah, you probably could bring like 3.5.
The one car I'm going to drive is going to have around 7.5 million in funding on it.
Yep.
Now we don't know how much of that is prize money.
We don't.
But let's just assume that there's not much prize money, because there probably isn't much.
No, there's probably not much.
And so let's just assume that any of the prize money goes towards paying the driver and team profits, right?
Yep.
So even if there's only $2 million in prize money, you still got to run the team off of 15 million, and then the driver and the team can split the profits.
Yeah,
prize money. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need 7.5 million in sponsorship to run a Formula E car.
That's what we discovered here. We don't know. We're not exactly sure the level of what each team spends. Maybe there's the lesser team where you only need 3.5. I don't know, but and how fast they would really be. But I thought it was interesting. I did find it like I've looked at what showed me that they have serious money behind them is when I always think the mark of a racing series is look at all the stuff that isn't usually on TV. So what I mean by that is always go and look at haulers, the surrounding, hospitality. Look at the way the teams invest in sort of how they present themselves at the racetrack, what their pit boxes look like, and all those things. And I always felt like you could tell a racing series' health by the how new that stuff was, its condition, and sort of the innovation happening around it. When series are doing well, innovation is happening everywhere. That's from pit boxes to hospitality to everyone. When they're not doing well, all you have to do is, if anyone listening was at Champ Car races in 2007, every bit of Newman, like even the best team in Newman Haas's stuff, looked like it had been through 10 years of the hardest short track racing you've ever seen. And I was like, that was the day the light bulb went off to me, and I was like, that is the mark of the health of the series. So when I looked at Formula E, you look around and their garage layouts and the innovation around the way they present the teams and the hospitality and all that just signals to me, okay, they're doing okay,
So basically, if we go to a Formula E race and the general manager is staying in the motorhome lot in a brand new Newell bus, then we know that it's going to be 7.5 million to get in the ride.
Exactly. That's the number.
But if we go to a Formula E race to meet with a team and the general manager meets us at the Marriott that he's staying at, or the Courtyard Marriott, or the Super 8, then we'll be like, maybe it's more like 2.5.
Exactly. Perfect.
Got it.
That's our Formula E financial breakdown. We'll keep you updated on how we do. Last thing here today, before we go, I just thought we need to talk about it. Threads versus Twitter. Threads being the Facebook, Instagram thing that came out, I guess this last week, was it? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I don't know, you and I are big Twitter guys, so this is interesting. Mm-hmm. For me, it's just another app. I don't want to open it, all these things. It seems like Twitter beta, in a lot of ways. But obviously, connected Instagram, if they're going to keep connecting it, Instagram's a very powerful platform. You're going to have to be on it. I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. But I'm curious
where Threads would win me over, and I noticed this in the weekend just because I got on Threads. I made a couple threads. I haven't even looked at the app in 3 days. It's not in my routine of app checking at the moment. And there's nothing new that I'm looking for in Threads that I feel like I can't already find on Twitter, even though I'm sure there already is. I just it's not in my habit to do it yet. But if Threads was integrated into Instagram, where
Game
there was
changer.
I'd open Instagram and do my routine through Instagram, and then there was a Threads like where I could click threads and just see my threads timeline. Or if it was even more integrated through Instagram, maybe not ruining the Instagram feed necessarily, but if it was integrated into Instagram that way and not like a standalone app, that could get me to probably spend more time on threads than, or to steal time away from the time I spent on Twitter.
Yep. It's a great point.
I don't know if that's where they're headed with it or what, but
it hit 100 million users, the fastest growing product of all time. And I don't know. I just find it's stickiness though. There's not stickiness. Well, that's the thing. It's what is the stickiness? I haven't found it. There's nothing that offers me different. Everyone's just taking. It's just like TikTok and Reels. They're just taking the same stuff and putting it over there. Vice versa.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same thing with Twitter and this. It's text based. It's the same format. What is the reasoning in it? Other than it's connected to Instagram and your following maybe is more valuable.
So
I don't know.
I thought of is there a content type of my own that I could just make threads the destination for only that? Right? Like if I came up with a new type of content that I wanted to make, whether it was writing jokes or, retweeting stupid stuff, I don't know. But it's just like you go to my threads timeline, that's where you see it. Instead of just like having two different conversations going at the same time on two different platforms that ultimately are the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Would just be like, my threads is where you just find pictures of my dog, or I don't know, the recipes that I cook. What's a random Instagram is where you'd find pictures of my dog, but I just mean
that's nice. Good.
Okay.
Well, that's it. That's all I had on this one. Watch the Firecracker 400 starting Wednesday, so starting when you listen to this podcast, and Thursday, eraser.gg. And also it's on twitch.tv/eraser_gg. And starts at 8. What time do we start tomorrow? Producer Josh, what time do we start? Is it 8 p.m.? No, the final is 8 p.m. We start at 7:10. 7:10 p.m. We should know
Eastern.
That. Eastern. 7 p.m., more than 300 competitors trying to make it all the way to the end over the next 3 weeks. It's the ultimate. It's the biggest sim racing event in America. Go watch it. Subscribe to the Money Lap newsletter. Thanks for listening. Hey, before you go, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, click the bell icon below to be alerted to our latest videos. We also request that you let us know every single thing that we did wrong in this video or prior ones in the comment section below. We might just go through and answer them, or you'll make it to the next episode of the podcast or our next video. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to be able to listen to this podcast on the go. And subscribe to our newsletter at themoneylap.com to get the best 5 minutes in motorsports delivered directly to your email inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching.